One of the most fatal mistakes that any business can make is not having accurate numbers, accurate, timely financial statements. I lost businesses because of that, because we were months behind and our bookkeeping was a total mess and chaos. I recommend never to do that, but here's how you do it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Freedom Blueprint. I am Adrienne Green, and today I have with me Jose Berlanga. Get ready for insights to help you scale, systemize, and create more freedom in your real estate investing. Now, Jose is originally from Mexico City, and now he is in Houston, been there since the 80s, and after doing a whole bunch of stuff, he is really killing it in the construction and development space. So, Jose, I'm really happy to have you here with me, and I can't wait for you to tell us all your experience and wisdom. Let's start with, how did you get started in real estate investing?
Well, hello, Adrienne. It's great to be here. Hello, all the way to Japan. Fascinating to be having this conversation from such far places. But yes, real estate now, it's part of my life for the last 30 years. I've been an entrepreneur my whole adult life, and perhaps a good portion of my childhood and my early years. So I've been an entrepreneur all my life, never having had the feeling of receiving a paycheck from a company that was not owned by me. Interesting experience, interesting feeling, good parts and bad parts. It's great to know that you've been pulling it off somehow throughout your career, that somehow you've made it one day at a time, 1 month and 1 year at a time, some good, some bad, some horrible, some wonderful. This has been the life of entrepreneurship, but the last few decades devoted mostly to real estate. Most of my businesses happen accidentally. A combination, you provoke accidents, obviously, you create and design your own destiny as you go. But being known as the guy who can help set up and start and build a business, I've partnered with different people, different young people throughout my career that are trying to build a business, that have come to me. I've been blessed to have great partners. This particular partnership, which has been the most important part of my career, the construction business and residential single family, started with my brother Tristan, my younger brother, who's an architect. At some point, he wanted to start building homes on his own, but he didn't have the business experience, the expertise to start and build a business. He had some of the technical aspects. He was an architect. He knew somewhat, although not enough. We were new. I was a young entrepreneur. He did not have any experience actually building a home on his own. And that's how it started. I started as I had already other businesses, so I had a little bit of capital. Not much, because I had already been through the famous ups and downs, and I was going through a tough time when we started this company back in the 90s. So long story short, I started as the investor in the business side of this business. Little by little, it grew from a tiny little bungalow that we built here in one of the inner city neighborhoods, and took off from there.
Wow, that's amazing. And I hear so many, I think good principles here that you've shared. Now, one thing I would love is, you tell the rest of your story here, is to talk about working with your brother. That's something that so many people in real estate investing are working with family, right? They're working with their spouse, they're working with brothers or sisters or other family members. And I'd love for you to kind of dive in how that worked for you. What were some of the challenges and what were some of the benefits of it?
Absolutely. I have a lot of experience working with family. One of my first businesses was with my dad. And that was tough because his work ethics were obsessive compulsive, and I get a lot of that from working with my dad. We partnered because we had different talents. He didn't speak English very well. So that's part of my initiation of my career, was partnering with my dad in the oil and gas business. Let's skip now to many other businesses, and then eventually to the construction residential business with my brother. One of the most wonderful partnerships. I compare partnerships with a marriage. You should be very, very careful selecting, choosing, and deciding to partner with anyone, not whether it's family or friends or people that you don't even know. Think about it twice. Be very, very diligent, very careful, because once you're in the partnership, you got to give it your all, and it is too late to turn back. So I've been lucky, but also very selective as to how and why I get into a partnership, because It's got to work and you got to give it your all, and you have to know that the other person is reciprocating. In this particular case, my brother and I, and I'm going to perhaps answer the question as to how did this go. It went excellent because we were more focused on our relationship and our mutual success than our individual desires and our individual perhaps needs to build a business. We were more focused on making it work. We compromised, we helped each other, we respected each other's talents, and there was an enormous amount of trust. So if you don't have that up front, don't partner. Just don't do it in the first place. So for 30 years, we were, well, actually, no, but let me back up because we retired, we phased out of that business, but we were partners for approximately 20 years. We did not have a single argument. We did not have a single problem, although we made millions, lost millions, went through every turbulent, difficult, imaginable circumstance, and not an issue because there was that love, that respect, that willingness to be there for each other. And you have to have that in a partnership. If you're selfish and just focus on what you want, it's not going to work. Right. Partnerships are not 50-50. They're 100 and 100. Every party has to give it all in order for it to work. Right. And it worked wonderfully, even when we didn't do well in business, because we were a support system rather than a problem. So we were able to navigate through difficulties together.
Mm-hmm. That's so important. I mean, if you think about like what you said with how partnership is like a marriage, right? If you and your spouse go through a tough time, right? If you guys face something, the last thing you want is for your spouse to come at you, right? Or find blame with you or anything like that. You are hoping to lean onto your spouse as your support person and you guys lean on each other through that tough time. But so often people don't apply that to business partnerships, right? They instead, yes, especially in the US, we can be very individualistic and just kind of think, how can I get out of this the best? So that's a great philosophy for people to use as they're going into partnerships or working through some tough times in their partnership.
We're always expecting the other person to do more and to give it their best without really self-reflecting on how much we're actually contributing and whether we're doing everything we can to make things work. So yes, that's the mentality that you absolutely have to be extremely careful in that selection process.
For sure. And I think people can just kind of jump into partnerships with anyone. So it's always a good reminder. Now, Jose, tell us about how you went, your first bungalow, right, that you built. And then I know it was a journey like all of them are with peaks and valleys. You said made millions, lost millions. What do you think that through line was, or what are the highlights from that experience you had with that business?
Understanding your business, you learn to figure things out, to problem solve, to become an expert in what you do. We learn to try to focus on one sector of real estate as opposed to trying to be all things to all people, which never works. We try to create our own niche market and become the best at one thing, not the best at so many things where you end up losing your focus. And it was a journey. I think part of what helped us become successful was that we were not just looking for success. We were looking for specific objectives of becoming better, of doing things right, of delivering quality, of offering the right product and service. And when you compound all those things, the results just are clear and simple, and it becomes all a consequence of your effort. So we weren't necessarily, in the early years particularly, looking for a home run, which is a mistake that all entrepreneurs make, to expect immediate gratification and immediate results and immediate profits. And we were persistent because we did not make money for years. It wasn't fun. It was a lot of sacrifice, a lot of work, very little in return. But once you understand that and you go in with that mentality of giving and putting up with whatever it takes, one random day without even noticing, without even understanding how, you're successful. But it takes years. And you stop focusing on that shiny object. You just focus on doing better, or providing a product that people want.
Right. That is such a good point. I think we don't think about in entrepreneurship, including real estate investing, that you're just going to grind away for years before getting a result. Now, I'm curious for somebody who may be in the thick of that right now, is there any kind of mindset or anything that you would pass along to help them get through that hard period of getting that ball rolling?
I could give endless amount of information and advice for new entrepreneurs that are going through those initial steps that are painful, but it's hard to really feel that pain through somebody else's shoes. But what I will say is to not feel alone, to not feel that the world is against you, that entrepreneurship is not for you. I'll tell you that if you're willing, it's not about being successful, but it's about being willing and able to tolerate the process. If you have the ability to put up with the pain, to put up with bad days, to put up with losing money, because we all have the ability to make money. That's very fun. We can all do that. But do you have the stomach to lose money, to lose your time, to invest days and months and years without getting anything in exchange? If you have that in you, if you have that ability to contribute without really expecting anything immediately in exchange, you are an entrepreneur and you're not alone. Just know that this is the way it works. You just don't get immediate results.
And that's so great to hear, because I feel like so often in our society, you only get the good days, right? That's what's shared on social media or the news of instant successes. But I love, you can just tell in your voice, Jose, that like you have been through that work, right? That work, that drudgery of just doing it day in, day out until you get that return. So thank you for sharing that. That's awesome.
Yes, my pleasure. I've been through so many battles, so many ups and downs. I often say that in entrepreneurship, there are more bad days than good days. There are more tough days than positive ones. And you just have to know that in advance. And if you can just travel that journey, eventually it gets you there. But that is one of the misconceptions, because now you just mentioned social media. Everyone likes to show those fun and exciting days and the success and how easy it is, because that's how human behavior reacts sometimes to doing well. But that's not the reality. I love talking about the reality about business, which is much more humbling. And you have to know it so that you don't get discouraged when you face it.
Right. Right. If you can expect it and it doesn't surprise you, that's like half the battle in dealing with it, for sure.
Absolutely.
All right. So take us back to your construction journey here. I know there was so much growth happening in Houston during the time you've been doing this. So I bet it was just a wild ride.
Yes. And we didn't even imagine how much we were going to grow. This is getting back to the process. I think that success happens when you stop thinking about it, and you're so focused and so entertained and you are so overwhelmed with your day-to-day activities, then one day you look back and before you know it, you've built things that you never imagined you would. So in our particular industry, we were very focused in one market, which was inner city, in revitalizing neighborhoods that were forgotten. This is a very interesting concept that was happening all around the United States. And many people didn't realize in the short term what was happening simultaneously around the country. Because if you think about it, in the earlier part of the century, well, mid-century, as people started migrating to the suburbs, the inner cities became almost obsolete and forgotten. So all of a sudden, in the 80s, people are starting to want to come back to the inner city. And this is when we started our business, when it started to be trendy again. Perhaps we came in a little earlier, before it was trendy. We were some of the pioneers that started building in areas that were transitional and that were not very appealing or attractive. They were borderline scary. So, but the locations were amazing. You were in the downtown, you were in the hip neighborhoods that where all the activity and restaurants and bars and the fun things were happening. And there was a new generation of home buyers that wanted to be close in, that didn't want the commute time and didn't want the suburbs. So our timing was right, but the speculation was there. It was very dangerous, very scary at the time, and highly speculative to build in these neighborhoods. So it was a combination of taking that risk and taking on this gamble that eventually worked. We started creating this new market, and we built a company that was amazing. Obviously, before you knew it, there was a lot of competition like everything else. There are very few businesses where you get to be the only one. You would have to invent something or come up with an amazing concept. But in the normal businesses that I've been involved with, there's been tremendous competition all the time.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, if there's profit and money to be made, other people are going to want to get some of that for sure.
There are people attempting to be successful in just about every type of industry than the actual opportunities that are out there. So the only way to really differentiate yourself is to outwork people, to put more sacrifice and more time and more effort than the rest of the people that are in the same industry. There is no other way. And the good news to those who are willing to put up with it is that not everyone has that passion for what this is part of the message. If you don't have that intention, that reason behind what you're doing, it's very likely that you will quit and that you will move on. If you're just focusing on making money and you just jump into an activity because you see an opportunity rather than you see a desire to do something right, there's a good chance that you're going to eventually walk away once things get difficult. And that's where the opportunities are.
Mm-hmm, right. Well, and I think that's a really good point. And I think what you can also speak to is because you've done multiple businesses, right, over your entrepreneurial journey, that you can have that passion for a business or to help, and it can evolve and it can become something else and a different passion over time. Can you kind of speak to, the different things you've done and how you had that desire and, were able to succeed in these different areas?
Business has a life of its own. It tends to take you where you never anticipated. Sometimes you design a path. Let's call it a business plan, which by the way, I'm very big on business plans. I do feel that investing enough time preparing for your business, doing the right due diligence, the right research, understanding, answering all of the questions that you can come up with before you start your business helps tremendously. But there's a big change once you actually start. The business starts acting in unpredictable ways. The markets, the pricing, the reaction of your customers, the reaction of competition, the fluctuations of the economy. So as an entrepreneur, you have to be very quick to adapt and pivot and listen to what your business is telling you. The numbers, what products are selling, which ones are actually profitable. I'm very big on information. I never start a business without setting up the right systems of information. Accounting, numbers, financials, cost control, a good solid profit and loss that provides you the information to act upon those results, to know what's working and what's not working. That's part of my lesson over the years, that I need a lot of information. I need numbers. I need not only accurate, but timely information to conduct business. And this is something that everyone needs to understand. And once you have that information, listen to it and pay attention and adjust. I'll tell you, for example, a quick funny story. When I was in the restaurant business, I wanted to have a hip, fun piano bar to add to this concept that we had many, many years ago, decades ago. But something went wrong because we ended up hiring a group that had a following that we were not aware of, that was a completely different crowd, a much older crowd than the one that I had planned for. The design of the room was for a younger crowd, the menu, the cocktails, the ambience. But what I didn't anticipate is that the musicians had their own following. And all of a sudden, I'm getting this crowd that I did not understand their taste. I did not understand what they wanted and how to provide their particular needs. But little by little, immediately we started adjusting everything to cater them, and it did very well. So we had to not get stubborn about what we wanted out of the business. We had to focus on what the business was doing, how it was operating, and where it was leading us, and then change the menu and adjust the menu and the drinks and so on and so forth, and little by little listen. But there's always signs. Your business talks back to you, your products and your customers, and you just have to figure out how to pay attention and have the open mind to really become better and become more successful and hopefully profitable.
Feeling overwhelmed managing your rental portfolio? What if you could run it like a business and free up your time? My one-on-one coaching program helps investors like you build systems at scale so you can grow without the chaos. Book a free strategy session today at adriennegreen.com/coaching. You'll find the link in the show notes. It's important that you make that business plan, and you have to then realize that if you're lucky, 20% is going to go according to plan, right?
Yeah, no, rarely does a business plan or a business or a concept goes as you planned it. And I would even go to the extent that as a seasoned entrepreneur, as someone who has already been in business for a long time, we can use any example from the existing businesses all the way to the billionaires. They still get surprises and unpredictable circumstances within their businesses. Rarely, even today, as I have been operating companies for decades, and even in the industries where I've invested most of my time, real estate and construction and development, rarely does a day go by when I don't have a list of shocking news and surprises about something not going the way that we planned it. So you get used to it. You don't ever get to enjoy it. You just manage to better tolerate it and to get faster at making decisions. You get faster at processing this unwanted, undesirable information about changes of plans, and you react better without really going into a denial phase of not being aware that in business nothing is going to happen the way you expect it.
Yeah. Well, and something you mentioned in this that is so important is how you have the systems in place to collect that data, right? To get, your KPIs so that you can pivot. When we're talking about, the real estate space, if there's somebody out there, an investor who's just like, I have no idea how to start tracking my numbers. I will, as you probably know, Jose, I'd say 99 out of 100 entrepreneurs and investors, their accounting isn't up to date. So they don't have, across the board, they struggle to get that data, like you said, the right data and in a timely fashion. So how would you speak to those entrepreneurs? What wisdom would you give them to help them set up those systems to get the data they need?
One of the most fatal mistakes that any business can make is not having accurate numbers, accurate, timely financial statements. I have lost businesses because of that, because we were months behind and our bookkeeping was a total mess and chaos. I recommend never to do that, but here's how you do it when you don't understand it, because most small businesses are obviously not bookkeepers or accountants or seasoned veterans in the numbers industry. So, number one, do research and understand the fundamental costs and the structure of the business that you're getting into. The cost of goods sold, what does it take to produce whatever it is that you're producing? Number one. Number two, what does it take for you to operate the company? Those are the two very basic categories, which are your cost of goods sold, your variable costs, and your fixed costs, which are the costs that it's going to represent to operate your business. Those are very, very simple. But here's the fun part that everybody neglects: to record every single dollar and penny that goes in and out of your account the moment it happens, and name what it was for. It is as simple as that. Nobody realizes how this is all about simple arithmetic. You don't need to be a CPA to have clean records. You just need to run to your computer the moment you write a check or the moment you receive a deposit, name it, tag it, understand what it is. Little by little, that information begins to tell you a story. As long as you record it immediately and you are super organized and it's accurate and you rush to keep that information intact and regularly, eventually it starts coming together and telling you what is working and what is not working, and you begin better at processing what happened, because it's so easy to start spending money or receiving money and losing track of why you got that money. Where did it go? I see money coming in and out and I don't understand what's happening. There are companies that have a lot of cash flow, but they're losing money. They have no profitability. Or vice versa. There are companies that are profitable, but they're running out of cash because they don't understand where it's going and what it's being applied to. So managing that is a matter of recording it and then studying it. And little by little, you start better categorizing all of those expenses until it becomes very, very clear. Now, eventually, we get much more sophisticated. Now we know which developments by price points, by finishes, by elevations, which square footages are doing better, what neighborhoods are doing better. And this applies to just about any industry, but it all starts by recording information. Period.
Right, right. I think you did a great job for that person who doesn't know where to get started to kind of explain a great viewpoint, approach, mindset, and strategy that they can implement to make a difference right now in their business. That was awesome. Thank you, Jose.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Putting a bunch of receipts in a drawer, it's not going to do the job. And then one day trying to reconcile them and make sense out of them. This is something very normal, by the way, that a lot of new business owners do, and it's not the way to do it. Don't just throw things in some cabinet, in some folder, and not organize them.
Right, right. No, having those up-to-date financials is, I just hope a listener, because, you know, Jose, like you said, you've lost businesses without having that information. I know I have had a lot of times where for my businesses, I've been behind on the bookkeeping and accounting until I got a better way, and now I never am, and it's transformational. So I would love if just one listener didn't have to make the mistake and learn the hard way, but instead just went and started doing what Jose says now, before you're behind on all your bookkeeping and accounting and having that pain.
Don't just focus on the fun parts of your business. If you want to be a realistic, successful entrepreneur, you have to understand that there are activities that are not fun and not pleasurable, but just as important. Your business depends, the well-being and the survival of your business depends on more than one activity, and none of them can be neglected. It's like having children. They all need equal attention. They're all as important. All of the areas, whether they're the ones that you like or the ones that you really don't want to deal with, they're all necessary. And when we start understanding that in a business, we begin to come together and build an actual company.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's like you wouldn't expect your kid to flourish in life if all you did was their soccer practice with them and you didn't feed them or bathe them or help them with their schoolwork, right? But sometimes we do the same thing with our business. We just want to do the fun part. So great point there.
Precisely. We do that with kids. You would focus too much on their sports or too much in school, and now they have no social skills, or they have no manners, or they have too much screen time, or it's a juggling act. Just like family, business is a juggling act. It's not just focusing on the passion projects and the fun activities.
Great. You've given us so much wisdom about entrepreneurship and investing in general. I'd love, because, I know you are so active with construction and development in Houston right now, or, 2025 and forward, what are you seeing as the trends going on with that right now?
In my particular market, in my particular industry, single-family residential construction, which is always evolving. The construction business, like fashion, like food, is always a moving target. Trends, finishes, styles are always progressing, are always modernizing. Some of the things that I am noticing, and you are a wonderful example. You love traveling, you love moving around the world. Less people want to be tied down to a home, to a mortgage. We are now pivoting a lot. We have a new division within our company, as a matter of fact, which is what we call in the industry BTR, build to rent. We build single family communities for the unique purpose of renting them. What we would normally design and build for a specific purpose of selling, now we just build them with the anticipated intention of renting the entire community, because there's a huge market of people that do not want to live in a condo or in an apartment. They want the single structure, they want their own driveway, their own garage, their own backyard, their own space, so on and so forth, all the amenities and privacy of a home. They just don't necessarily want to buy it and stick around at that particular location. There are the two sides. There are people who want to own, there are people who want to live in a home, but they don't want to own it. So that's a huge trend that is happening in our industry. Another trend is, of course, people want more quality space than amount of space. So we have to get, as developers, more focused on the right flow, the right design, in a smaller footprint. That's happening a lot as well. But years ago, perhaps a decade or two ago, was a 2,000 to 3,000 square foot. Now it's more of a 1,200 to 1,600 square foot plan for the same type of buyer. They're just needing or wanting less space, particularly in the inner city, and also because of the cost of living. Things are getting so expensive for both the developers and for the consumers that we are trying to figure out how to do this in a smaller amount of space. And the trends go on, but those are two big ones that I could mention.
Yeah, I have seen those for myself. I know, before we started traveling internationally, we were in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and my daughter took her to a friend's house for a play date, and it was in a build to rent community. And the place was less than a year old, and it was one of the first times, I know they have a few in Chattanooga, that it was one of the first ones, and they were all new, where I went in and saw, yeah, this is like a subdivision, right? A subdivision of single family homes, but they're all rentals. It was crazy because that, like you said, it didn't exist probably. I mean, that to my knowledge, even maybe 5 years ago, and definitely not a decade ago. It's an interesting concept and shows how people are changing for sure.
It's a new trend and it's growing rapidly and monster companies are focusing on this. There are very, very big players that are acquiring entire subdivisions for this purpose.
Yeah. And I think, for both of those trends, I theorize, I don't have any data to back it up, but it's like, we think of my parents' generation where it was like so much free time was spent maintaining that house. Right? Mowing the yard, painting, doing these odds and ends. I remember as a kid, going and changing all of the light switches and electrical outlets in our house with my dad, because they wear over time. They were a few decades old and we were changing them all. And I don't think people today, like especially people, let's say in their 20s, want to do that with their free time. They want to have fun instead of taking care of a house.
The newer generation wants to live a lighter life with less responsibilities and not be as accountable. We'll see what the next generation is, but now the new trend is to just have a little bit less to worry about and having the ability to move around a little easier.
Right. Yes, very mobile too. Great points, Jose. Well, this has been amazing. Tons of wisdom. I'd love to wrap up with our closing questions. I'm sure you'll have amazing answers. So let us go through those real quick. The first is, what is your go-to tool for managing operations?
That's one that also has many, many answers. What is your go-to tool? And I always have trouble because I can think of dozens, but the one is discipline, repetition. That's my number one tool. I don't have a necessary magic piece of software, let's call it, or any other technological aspect. So I'll answer by saying that every system works as long as you properly and efficiently operate it. So as long as you use systems and you use them consistently with the right discipline, most systems within a company work well. It's just being organized. My number one tool is to be a very organized entrepreneur. I plan my day, I prioritize it, I define what has to absolutely get done today, and I try to give it an order of importance. So the tool is to organize your thoughts. Organize your thoughts clearly every day before you attack.
That is a really good point. I love your insight there that whatever tool you have is only as good as your use of it. So very nice. And then next, what is your one piece of advice you'd give to your younger self when you were just starting out?
Most young people are inundated with advice. Very few of them pay attention to it or follow it, unfortunately, because it is not the same to listen to advice than to actually live things on your own. I think about this question very often, and a lot of my answers are very unorthodox. They're not as simple because life is not simple. And I wouldn't give myself much advice because I did the best I could with the information I had at that particular moment. I have very few regrets because I have always given it my best, and I have always operated without the crystal ball. I didn't know where economies were going to go. I didn't know what industries were going to do, but I acted to the best of my ability. The only advice I would give myself is to have more confidence, have more faith that things are going to work out as long as you do your part, as long as you show up every day, and as long as you are responsible and hardworking, the rest is going to happen. Just you need to have faith that things are. And I lack throughout my career, I always lacked faith. I always had that fear that things were not going to happen and that I would never reach my goals. And that's the number one advice I would give myself, is just have a little more faith in yourself. It's all going to work out.
That is fabulous, and I think you're not alone in maybe stressing instead of having faith. So I'm sure someone listening will take that to heart and it'll help them today. And then finally, what is a book that has been transformational in your investing journey?
As a matter of fact, I'm going to also pivot that answer. My most interesting is my own book, because I am unloading years of reading, of understanding, of compiling. There is not one source of information. I've started hundreds of books and I rarely finish them because I'm massively ADD. I'm one of those people that reads a paragraph and I space out and I start thinking about 300 different things. So I have, rather than life-changing books, I'm the type of person that reads a lot of headlines, a lot of articles, a lot of things that provide me with information that keep me up to date with what's happening in my industry and what's happening around the world, so that I can make better decisions. So I'm not a person that had a life-changing moment by reading a book, but an accumulation of pieces of information that eventually I did something with them, and that allowed me to improve the way that I ran not only my business, but my life. And eventually now it's helping me to be able to dispense this information and help others by writing. I love writing, by the way, more than I love reading nowadays, because it's a completely different part of your brain. Reading requires a lot of attention that's difficult for ADD people like myself. But writing is more creative. It allows you to unload thoughts, concepts, ideas, philosophies that might help someone else just as well. So that was a long answer, but there it is.
So tell us about your book, Jose.
And I'm on my third one, by the way, and I'm going to keep going. This is my other side. The obsessive compulsive kicked in. I waited decades to write a book. I always thought that a person was not worthy of writing a book until he or she had lived enough, until someone had gone through enough experiences, enough pain, enough ups and downs, to actually be able to provide a little bit of information to the next person. So I always wanted to do this, but I waited and piled up information. And I started with my first book was dedicated to this industry, which is where I've devoted most of my career, the construction industry, the residential industry, but not how to build a home or how to build any kind of structure. This is how to build a business that builds homes or that builds anything or even any other product. This is more about entrepreneurship. The second one now is about land development, land investing, speculating. And now I'm continuing with a third one, which is more about the mentality, the lifestyle of an entrepreneur. But I have had so much fun doing this because it's cathartic. It's a way for you to really, really rationalize what you have done over your life, over so many years, and to be able to make sense out of it, to really understand what it is that you went through to get to where you are.
That's amazing. Well, Jose, as we wrap up here, how can people reach out to you if they'd like to connect or have a conversation or learn more?
joseberlanga.com, and there's several websites there of some of my businesses. That's perhaps the main one because I'm not one of the most active in social media. I've been a very anonymous business guy over the years. So I'm beginning to adapt. Like we were talking, pivoting, adjusting to a new era. I'm a very easy guy to find on the internet.
Awesome. Well, and we will have that in the show notes. And I think you're also a great example that there's lots of ways, I always like the phrase, as uncouth as it may be, if there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? You don't have to be on social media to be a successful business person. That might be a great takeaway for someone today who's stressing about that. So thank you so much, Jose, and thank you to the listeners. Now, if you have enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like and subscribe wherever you're listening, and think about who do you know who could really benefit from hearing Jose's message. Who could that help today? And go ahead and share this episode with them. Just shoot it over via text and let them listen and learn from it as well. So thank you to our listeners so much, and I look forward to seeing you here for another episode next week.